But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
Number ZZ9 plural Z alpha. Number ZZ9. I said I've never seen such hideousness in all my life.
Listen, Lord, they say.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with bite.
But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
Number ZZ9 plural Z alpha. Number ZZ9.
Hello and welcome to Hannah's mic doesn't unmute. Welcome to HBR Talk 285. Why do feminists do this? I'm your host, Hannah Wallen, here with the personification of perceptivity, Mike Stevenson, and tonight we're wading into a flood of feminist baloney. But before we get to that, we gotta do what we gotta do. As always, Honey Badger Radio dishes out a smorgasbord of thought-provoking discussions, and as experiences both recent and long past have demonstrated, the provoked thoughts are fighting back. They've made it clear that for people like us, relying on third-party payment platforms like Patreon to fund our work is treading on thin ice, or building our house in the path of a rapidly growing wildfire. In light of this, we strongly encourage our supporters to switch at least their support for us to feedthebadger.com, the most stable way to help us out. And if you want to tip us directly instead of relying on any social media platform's tip jar, the link for that is feedthebadger.com/justtip. And as always, the same risk applies to our social media platforms, which is why you should further provoke the thought police by tracking our thought-provoking discussions on honeybadgerbrigade.com, where you can find your way to all of our content, as well as a link to feedthebadger.com in the drop-down menu at the top of the page. And so before we get any further into this, I just wanted to point out, sort of recap a little bit, and then I also have some light housekeeping to do. So I'm not going to do necessarily a show on it being Movember, No Shave November, but I will point out, if you look up the Movember website, it's there. It still funds a lot of great things, and a lot of men's health initiatives are included in that. And there's some differences of opinion on how good the site still is, because they are funding some psychology initiatives. So, and they are focusing also on male suicide, but they do seem to be focusing on it from a more feminist perspective, and that does bother me and a lot of other people. On the other hand, they are also, like, you can see a list on their site of the organizations doing research for uniquely male cancers, testicular cancer and prostate cancer, penile cancer. So even if you don't want to participate in that, there is the possibility of going on the site, looking at who they're funding, and especially, like, they're doing this internationally, so you could go and see who in their country you're funding. And I'm sure that most of those organizations also have public information you can find. And this is a good month to do that, simply because it'll be in conjunction with funding coming in from that organization. So just depending on, how you feel about the organization. And of course, the other thing is, this Sunday, I believe it's this Sunday, will be the 19th. And that is International Men's Day. Now, I haven't looked on the International Men's Day website, but I've seen a few things about focusing again on the issue of male suicide for International Men's Day as well. So that's another one that there are different organizations doing different things. And I kind of recommend doing a search for that, because there's too many things for me to list off just today. So I just wanted to mention those two things. Kind of important to keep up on that. Be ready for the social media blitz of feminists going, "You were talking about this on our day, so we're going to talk about our day on your day." And flooding you with comments about toxic masculinity on International Men's Day just because they're assholes. And with that, we'll get into, I just want to remind everybody what we've previously looked at in regard to this, just the first few paragraphs of this article. There's been a pattern kind of established. Flood seems to be constructing straw men of our actual talking points and arguments in regard to the media, and then tossing just random feminist complaints to try to knock them down. And so far, nothing that he has said indicates that the media is either not man-hating or that it doesn't cater to female audiences. Mostly what he's done is show that more men are portrayed under a variety of situations. And, I look at that, and you look at major media, movies, television, games, and stuff. Yes, there is a diversity, as he says, of positive and negative roles, especially for white men. But what he leaves out is the red shirt phenomenon. If you're going to get rid of a character, if you're going to kill off a character, most media kills off a man. So if there are extra men in order to be killed off. If there's going to be, a character that everybody hates because that character does stupid things or bad things or gets the rest of the characters in trouble for one reason or another, it's usually a man. Right? Comic relief, the character that everybody makes fun of, usually a man. Because you can't do that with women. And it's remarkable when they do it with women, So the expendable character, the butt of the joke character, right? The straight man. The character that you're supposed to applaud when they get killed. Like everybody claps in the movie theater when the lawyer in... shit, I can't think of the stupid Island of the Dinosaurs movie. Damn it! Why is that a blank in my head? Like that movie is Jurassic Park. That movie is classic now. It wasn't at the time, but everybody clapped in the theater when the lawyer gets eaten, right? Man. So the asshole is a man. You don't see women as often portrayed as assholes in modern pictures, or if they are, it's supposed to be a good thing. So, we kind of went over that. But he's going to start repeating himself here. And so, fair warning about that. And then he's also going to make some claims that, again, they're completely irrelevant. And we can explain why. So, the last thing we read last week was, as a media report documents, in which he does cite the report. At the end of the paragraph, he says, Smith et al. 2012. This tells you, by the way, when you cite a source to a feminist and they tell you 2012 is too long ago, then you can point out that many of Flood's sources for his claims are that old and older. But he says, as media report documents, women comprise only 28% of characters in family films, 39% of the characters on primetime TV, and 31% of those in children's programs. And I think I pointed out last week. So we're talking family films, characters on primetime TV, and children's programs, right? And
children's programs, for one thing. Children's programs feature a lot of characters that are neither male nor female.
Right.
They're just sort of this weird splodge of happy, smiley emotions, or they're just puppets that don't have an outward biological sex because they don't have a lower half of their body and stuff like this. So, and yet he's making out like every character who isn't a female character is therefore taking something away from female characters. I mean, you can make a character out of anything. You can make a pencil talk, but I guess if it talks in a slightly male voice, then it must be male. I don't. Maybe men are easier to work with, particularly in Hollywood. And aside from anything else, all he's doing is talking about the number of characters, and that's not all there is when it comes to representation on screen. Like if you've got 10 male characters and they all represent different flaws, like they all have something a little bit wrong with them, and that's their purpose in the dynamic and in the story. And you have one female character and she's perfect in every way. she's what we refer to as a Mary Sue. She never does anything wrong. If she ever needs help, she gets it. And she's the moral center of the story. She's the one who reacts to everything. And you're always expected to be on her side when it comes to things like you were talking about earlier. How you can have a bunch of male villains and one female hero, and the likes of Michael Flood will Bechdel test all that bullshit into, well, this movie obviously hates women. It's much like the what are they called? Not the Marvels, the Avengers.
Yeah.
The Avengers have 10 slightly flawed men to every, and then they have Black Widow, and yet she's morally perfect in every way. Or that Scarlet Witch thing. even when she's burning civilizations to death, she's still morally perfect in every way, or at least that's what they want us to think, what they expect us to take away from it. So you can't just throw big numbers at things without
Exactly.
actually examining how these characters are portrayed and how the audience is expected to react to them. And it's always man bad, woman good. It doesn't matter how many men or women are. Yeah.
Well, and when you look at family films, like I'm gonna go back in time again. The Look Who's Talking films, for instance, right? There are three main characters. One of them is an infant, and then the next films you have the infant and the pets, and the main characters aren't. There's the male and female adult male character or main characters. Well, 50% of the adult main characters in that film, that series, are female, and 50% are male. And then you have, the other characters, a dog, a cat, and a baby. If I remember right, there's a dog. And so again, family films and numbers like that. When you get into that, it's feminists have this idea or this sort of attitude that if women's egos aren't catered to by something, then women are not the target audience, right? But when we start mentioning the superhero films, the various superhero films, and I'll go clear back to my childhood and the superhero films for my childhood and the action hero films for my childhood. I'm going to read the next paragraph on this, and then point out the next couple paragraphs, and then point out some things about this. So he says, a study of the top grossing films in 2019 found that males comprised 63% of major characters and females comprised 37%. And he's doing the numbers thing the whole way through. Males accounted for 66% of speaking characters, while females accounted for 34%. Overall, audiences were almost twice as likely to see male characters as female characters in the top grossing films of 2019. Roles for men and stories about men continue to be the norm. Films focused on female characters with storylines supposedly of interest to women are termed chick flicks, while films focused on male characters with characters and plots telling men's stories are considered to be the norm. So I'm gonna touch on that because I think that that's a massive oversimplification. Who's the target audience for Loki in the MCU films? Who spends the most time online posting pictures of Loki with little stupid hearts all around and over them? Why did they pick an actor who had the sort of moody pretty boy attractiveness for that character? Who were they trying to trigger there into fits of rapid heartbeat and being Twitter-pated and so on? Like it definitely wasn't middle-aged men. I'm pretty sure it wasn't teenage boys. Right? I think maybe we might be touching on the subject of how teenage girls look at guys. Like maybe just a little bit there. And who absolutely loves Bruce Willis movies? Both sexes. Why? Because the stories are fun to watch, they're over the top, they're told well, there's a lot of fun action in the movies, and they are, in the end, gynocentric. Right? There's always the protect the city, protect the girl, protect the take care of the daughter, protect the woman. There's always the love interest. There's always this or that in the types of movies that action heroes are portrayed in, and they almost always pick somebody attractive, right?
Yeah, every movie has at least 3 casting directors, or at least
Right.
three people who sit behind that table while everyone auditions. At least 3, and it always contains at least one woman or a gay man who's there to let everyone know, yeah, this this guy's got something about him.
Yeah.
Before and after they've taken off their shirt. And I guess they also have someone who can point out which women are better looking than others, but I guess that's more obvious or less obvious to others. Like, even if the audience is intended to be mostly male, there'll be a woman somewhere in the casting directing position, sort of guiding it towards what women want to see, and what women want to see is pretty boys. Guys aren't particularly bothered about pretty boys. Muscles, yes. I mean, even young boys, like, they want to see characters with big muscles, even if it's cartoons. They always have. It's this aesthetic appeal. It's easy to draw, if nothing else. But pretty boys, no. Men don't give the slightest shit what your face looks like. You could be gnarled up in pieces, and they'll be like, we don't care. But women, yeah, very much. They want to see the face of whoever he was who was cast as Loki. Yeah.
I don't know his name. I just know that I see a shitload of memes and ships and girls telling their daydreams about the character in public. Like, oh, I don't want to know that. Really? Can we not? But that kind of thing, basically. And of course, like, it's fine. People sharing stuff like that on sites where it's made for that. Like, there are whole spectrums of pages on websites for fan fiction, and shipping is included in that. But I don't know why people do it on Twitter, right? Like, everybody's gonna see that, not just the people that get on the site to read that shit. People that get on the site to find out what their cousin posted about the game last week will see your stupid comments about how beautiful Loki is. Like, it's dumb, right? But girls do that. Teenage girls do that. Adult women do that. Adult women fangirl over things in public. And it's again, it's embarrassing. But my big point here is, these movies have to appeal to women. Men's movies that are supposedly just for men, that Flood is calling the norm, have to appeal for movies. The difference between those movies and chick flicks is that chick flicks do not have to appeal to men. It's not necessary, because women will watch them with or without a guy. If you're talking the made-for-TV movies that get played on Oxygen, I think, is a women's channel. LMT, I don't know what it stands for, but it always has these weird titles next to the label for it. Like, my stepsister tried to kill my husband after she had his baby, or some crappy, weird, like, porn soap opera title that women get into, and stuff like that. But even more popular movies, like Ella Enchanted was a big one with the little girls when my kids were little. Those movies don't really have to appeal to men. Moms will take their daughters to see it because they want to see it. Dads will take their daughters to see it because they get nagged into it. And also, it's fun to watch your kids watch a movie. If you've got kids, you know what I mean. Especially when they're really into or excited about the movie. But most of the movies that are considered to be the norm, those movies have to appeal to both sexes. And so it's a lie. It's an outright lie to say this is not about... This somehow debunks MRA claims and demonstrates that, I don't know, the movie industry is dominated by men.
Yeah, if men complain even en masse that a particular movie doesn't speak to them as men, doesn't represent them as men, no one's going to take them seriously. They're going to go, "Screw you! You're a man. This is Hollywood. Have you not heard of us?"
Yeah.
You know, the slightest shit what our male audience thinks of us. In fact, we're going to villainize you as we attempt to market this movie. This movie isn't for straight white men. Not only do you not care about the complaints, you relish them. You use them as part of your marketing. So don't be telling me that there's anything androcentric about this. If you even know that word, Michael.
He probably does. Probably uses it all the time. But I mean, honestly, if the norm was movies that are made just for men, and the rest was all that was left for women, then when you go back in time and think about the movie Assassins, right? The main male character in that movie would have been played by somebody like Danny Trejo instead of Antonio Banderas. If you really didn't care about women seeing the movie, you wouldn't have put a heartthrob in that role. Right? That's just the way it is. So he goes on to say, on TV, men are more likely than women to play criminals, but also more likely to be in professional roles, law enforcement roles, and blue-collar jobs, while women are more likely to not work or their work is not shown. Which, honestly, that's kind of bullshit. There are whole TV shows about women in their professions that are just about women in their professions. And where men are shown in their professions, a lot of times it's the main female character's life story is the story of the movie, where her home life is the most important thing, or her social life is the most important thing. Work is just kind of a background. And men are shown in their professional roles in supporting roles. The man is the taxi driver that takes her to the event that she's going to, or he's the janitor at her apartment complex, or he's doing road work and he's in her way. He's the cop that arrests the bad guy that has been stalking her throughout the entire movie. It's not really honest to talk about this again in terms of men. It's not that the movies suggest that men are professional and criminals and women just sit around at home and do nothing. It's that when you have an unimportant person to portray, that their only importance in the whole setting is how the job they're doing contributes to the main character's experiences, that is often a man. And of course, a lot of those roles are going to be divided. Like, they'll portray somebody who works in retail possibly as a woman, but they'll portray somebody who does a dirty job as a man, because in real life there are a lot more women who work in retail and there are a lot more men who do dirty jobs, and you basically want something believable if it's going to be a background character and not make a big statement. So that's another one that really sort of stuck in my craw, because it's dishonest, just as much as it is to talk about men's movies as the default. For fuck's sake, if we had movies made just for men, and when we have movies that are made more for men than for women, and not to cater to both sexes, that they don't put in female eye candy and female spank bank material, basically, you get complaints that the movie was for incels, right? You get it. It's the incel anthem. Look what they said about Joker, right? The movie that portrayed a man falling down in a sympathetic light, at least as sympathetic as possible. This is how you create a sociopath. This is how you create a psychopath. Well, everybody hates it but men. Women complain that the movie was even made. How dare you cater to men's interests? I remember a shitload of comments about the violence and the over the top testosterone and stuff in 300, which I still haven't seen. So I don't know if any of that is even true, but it doesn't matter. If the target audience was men, women don't have any business complaining about it, right? So you have these ridiculous level complaints, right? This is gender bias because men are portrayed this way and women are portrayed that way. Men are portrayed as disposable. Women are portrayed as interesting.
And you may have noticed he's now resorted to this phrase, more likely.
Mm-hmm.
In previous paragraphs, there was always a percentage. There's 66% more, there's 22% less of that. But you got none of that here, have you, Michael? You just got more likely to be in professional roles, law enforcement roles, and blue-collar jobs. How much more likely, Michael? 66% more likely? You haven't even got that anymore. He's still not addressing the way that women are made the emotional center, the ethical center of the movie, even if there's only one of them in there. All he's had up until this point was to throw these numbers at it, and he doesn't even have those numbers anymore, which makes me wonder how is he measuring this? How professional a role does a role have to be? How prominent in the story does it have to be before he's including it in his statistic of quote unquote more likely? We're falling further and further down the hole of vagaries that Mr. Flood is presenting. I can't wait to see where he goes next.
Yeah, I kind of want to know what his source is for that, because I think it's his butthole. Honestly, I've seen men and women both portrayed as professionals and both portrayed as criminals. It's just that when women are portrayed as criminals, it's done so in a sympathetic manner. And when men are portrayed as criminals, if it's done at all in the least bit sympathetic, there's criticism that we're encouraging that, right? It just, I don't know. I guess my biggest complaint about this is, again, he has set up a straw man, and then he has thrown feminist complaints about it that don't actually do anything to the straw man. So now we have a bunch of feminist complaints stuck on the straw man. So let's see, we have the next paragraph. He says, gender biases in fictional dialogue are well documented in media. In film, television, and books, female characters tend to talk less than male characters, talk to each other less than male characters, talk to each other, and have a more limited range of things to say. This he has a source for. A major analysis of 2000 film screenplays found that across them, 60% of dialogue was spoken by men. And it's funny because feminists talk as though that's the norm in real life, and then they complain about it getting portrayed that way in the movies. If they were to admit that women just never shut up, because we don't, then they might have a complaint. But the other thing is, they're still talking about numbers, how much people talk and who they're talking to. It doesn't say anything about what they're talking about, what their speech's target audience is, how that portrays the men, and so on. And women's roles in films are not silent. There may be quite a bit of silent action where you see women doing things in films and they're by themselves and they're not talking to anybody because they're by themselves. But a lot of times when you see men's speech in television and movie roles, it's still background shit. The cop that's directing traffic says to people, move along, like a cop directing traffic would do. And suddenly, well, that's a man's line in the movie. Like, so what? You know, the bad guy has a monologue and he says a bunch of stupid shit or mean shit or whatever. Okay, the bad guy's supposed to have a monologue, but if women don't get played as the bad guy as often, don't get portrayed as the bad guy as often, then they're not going to have the bad guy monologue, are they? You know, so women are only allowed to say things that are clever, where men are allowed to make mistakes and have flaws and have to correct them, have to learn things, right? Oh gosh, I figured out I'm the bad guy. I'm the idiot. I'm the asshole. I gotta fix this. I did something wrong. How many times do you hear women in a movie say, I'm sorry, versus men? Or beg for forgiveness versus men?
They wouldn't.
Yeah.
They get complaints from the female audience, which they would take seriously.
Yeah. You know, I like how many times do you see women being ordered to go do things that are going to get them killed versus men? So yeah, just when you start talking about just the number of speaking, it's kind of bullshit again. Then he says, anti-feminist commentators neglect the question of race and racism. But media portrayals of men of color are often poor. Example, the frequent portrayal of African American men as dangerous thugs. Now, who does that?
I mean, men are often portrayed as dangerous thugs. That's your phrase is exactly 2 words too long there, Michael. I mean, yes, there are African American men portrayed as dangerous thugs in movies, but I reckon there are around 13% of them, Michael. There are around 13% of the men portrayed as dangerous thugs in movies, and that's generous. They used to do in the 80s when this wasn't a problem anymore, but nowadays you have this issue of no matter how many or how few black men you put in your movie, there's this brilliant meme of I would have to describe it for you. It's a combination of one guy holding a gun up to another guy, and if the one guy is black, or if the other guy is black, or if they're both black, or if they're both white, no matter what combination there is a woke complaint for it. If it's a black guy shooting a white guy, it's like, this is racist. You're portraying black guys as thugs. If it's a white guy pointing a gun at a black guy, it's like, you're obviously glorifying violence against black people. If they're both black guys, it's you're portraying black people as being criminal to each other. And if it's just a white guy shooting a white guy, this is racist. There are no black guys in this movie. So at this point in history, it's very rare to present an African American man as a dangerous thug, because it would be called racist, which is why they're all white men at this point, and not just in movies, but in the television, and especially in commercials. Yeah, you have to travel deep into the annals of the internet to even find anyone who will portray black men as thugs, let alone women of any kind as thugs. Did that occur to you, Michael, when you talked about how women are portrayed in movies, and you're making the point about how you shouldn't portray certain demographics as dangerous thugs? When are women ever portrayed as dangerous thugs? It's not often, is it? And is that because women in real life, in reality, are not very often dangerous thugs? Well, they're not very often blue collar workers, Michael. they're not very often, professional roles or law enforcement roles, as you call them, or whatever it is that you're referring to as those things. So does entertainment, does fiction have to represent the the reality of where you're more or less likely to find men or women, or doesn't it? He asked, as though he's expecting a straight answer. You don't get straight answers from the likes of Michael Flood. You get another paragraph of the bullshit he was taught to spew in university. I look forward to it.
Well, and I kind of wonder who creates movies, for instance, who creates the stories about, say, black gangs and the gangs in minority neighborhoods, the fighting between them, about historical figures in those storylines and so on. You usually see at least the writing has been done by people who have lived experience with that, or the directing is done by people who have lived experience of that. It's glorified by people who have lived experience of that, or people of color, right? You don't see necessarily everybody involved in the administration of that being white. So, and who's their target audience? Is their target audience, white men? Who do you expect to see in the theaters?
Generally speaking, the target audience that they expect to get all their money from is men.
Yeah,
but the target audience that they give a shit about is women.
Right.
Mostly white women, because they do most of the complaining.
Yeah, but the target audience is mostly women. And again, they're doing the same thing. They're glorifying the alpha male role, right? They're glorifying the toughest guy, the strongest guy, the guy that has the best capability of providing, dominates the other guys, and so on. And there's always some level of gynocentrism even in those movies, right? So, and there's a lot of those movies that are also made to draw attention to types of conflict and lived experiences in neighborhoods that have been hit by poverty and fatherlessness and the the workings of certain government agencies that may have sort of spiked the drug use in the United States a little bit, things like that. But yeah, we talk about it in terms of racism. Why? Because if you acknowledge that these things happen in real life and there are stories to tell about them and questions to ask about them and considerations to have about them, like, what can we do for the people who this is happening to? What can we do to raise them up, help them not have this type of experience as their life experience? You can't have those discussions without having some sort of popular media address this. And it's historically, that is what we have done. We've written about, as a race, as a species, we've written about our greatest pains, our ugliest sides, our biggest fears and horrors about the real world and about ourselves, what we do to each other as human beings. We've written about war and death and terrible weather and horrible creatures and man against nature and everything. But of all things, if these conflicts are experienced by minorities, suddenly you can't talk about them. Well, I think that's kind of racist, if you ask me. And we just got to leave them there in their little hole and not let them get out by, maybe examining the issues that have them stuck there, right? None of the people that have gotten out or never ended up in that little hole can reach in and pull them up either, because that's apparently racist. Even if it's black people helping black people. Thanks, Michael. In music videos, this is one that's really gonna. In musicals, when women appear, typically their role is as sexual objects. So I gotta say this. No one does that more than women. No male videos portraying women are as blatant and over the top and ridiculously in your face sexual as female rappers' videos, right? None of them are as blatantly in your face, ordering you to be gynocentric, ordering you to look at a woman as a sex object, as modern pop country music videos, right? Madonna made her whole career about look at my tits. Right? Britney Spears, her whole career was about being seductive in her music. And yet, this complaint is made as if it's men's fault.
In music videos, literally everyone is presented as a sex object. It's guys in bands, women in bands. If you're gonna present them aesthetically, then obviously you're gonna play up to the fact that everyone fancies, musicians, rock stars, pop starlets, and stuff like that. So they're always going to be shot in a sexy way. They're always going to be wearing something trendy, and that's sort of the difference. For men, the trend, especially with musicians, is not being scantily clad. We've talked about this for years. Men are not objectified in the same way as women. Women are objectified. If you could even call it objectified, I can't stand that word, and it doesn't make any sense. But women are very often treated as ornaments, and men are very often treated as tools. And that's why the one is presented behind leather jackets or suits or some kind of uniform that represents what they do. Whereas women don't have to quite work so hard in that direction. They just remove clothes rather than add them, because it's not necessarily what they do. It's what they are, and looking like something is the distillation of being something without doing something. And even women in rock groups are sort of presented in that similar way. But as you say, is more the case in rap music, and even in rap music, sort of men, when they have the figure for it, very much often are sort of topless and covered in bling.
Yeah, or they're in leather pants that are so tight you can tell their religion.
Exactly, and this is just a reflection of how music has become a visual medium ever since video killed the radio star. In fact, so yeah, there's nothing new about using sex to sell music or using sexually charged visuals to sell music. It's just that there are different tried and tested ways of making men sexy and making women sexy. Like I say, with men it's the uniform, and with women it's just them looking like women.
Yep. And something else I've noticed, when it comes to videos that have a lot of creativity in the way they're made, not just videos with a storyline, but videos that sort of break ground in manner of presentation, like videos that combined for the first time real footage with cartoon drawing or line drawing around the real footage, doing neat little effects and stuff like that. Videos that have instead of the main characters, being the actual band, videos that have cartoon characters representing the band, things like that. It's usually men's groups, where there's a lot more creative work done to present the music. Women become popular by showing off their bodies. Women become popular by showing off themselves as fashion plates. Women become popular singing songs about how bad men are. Women become popular singing songs about what big victims they are and how strong they are for being these big victims and not dying because of it. Or they have the train wreck anthem, right? Like, Don't Let Me Get Me, and, stuff like that. But men become popular singing ballads and songs about how effective and great they are. They become popular singing songs about how much they love this or that woman, how important this or that woman is to them. Songs about the woman herself and her personality and her character and what an interesting or weird or strange person she is. And if they do sing songs about how rotten this woman is, a lot of times historically it's had to be disguised. Like, a lot of people think She's Always a Woman is a flattering song. It's not. Very much not. It's intended to... it's not necessarily intended to be unflattering, but it's intended to show that you can love a woman with flaws, right? So,
but how it comes across is it doesn't matter what a woman does ever.
Right.
She essentially has no agency because she's a woman. She could literally cut my balls off in my sleep, but she's always a woman to me. That might as well have been a verse in that song.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the line that really always got me was, she'll carelessly cut you and laugh while you're bleeding. And I'm like, who does that? Women. So, yeah, it's just, again, he makes this argument as though it means something. And then that's it. He doesn't actually apply it to anything. Men have to work harder to be popular in music than women do. It's just a flat out thing. Women have to work hard at being sex objects. Men have to work hard at every aspect of what they do. And there's a lot more male artists that I know of that have written their own music as opposed to female artists, especially in pop music. They either remake other people's stuff, and that's even in metal. They either remake other people's stuff, or they play stuff that somebody else wrote for them. Now that's not universal. Like, there are women that wrote their own stuff, or female bands that wrote their own stuff, but it's just... Again, it's a more masculine thing to have to do all of the work instead of just part of it. In advertising, he says, there have been positive shifts over time in advertising portrayals of women's roles. However, many still show men as leaders and protectors and women in roles dependent on men, and the sexual objectification of women in advertising has worsened.
Are you fucking kidding me?
And he cites Anderson for this. Obviously, he's only talking about beer ads. I can't think of... If you watch daytime television, women are the target audience for the ads. It is flat out almost always for women. In fact, my favorite example of this is game shows are often just half-hour-long ads with more ads in between, and the best example of that is The Price is Right. The Price is Right is literally just ads. A whole game show full of ads. And the product placement and everything in it, the prizes and everything, the way that they're described, it's all ads. And it's all designed to get women to want to buy things specifically. It's why they're always giving away, like, sometimes they give away cars, I guess, but they're always giving away things that are more of female interest. You don't usually see them giving away things like season tickets to some athletic team, their events, or anything like that, right?
Or a barbecue set.
And then if you look at primetime TV, there are some ads for things for men, but they're all still gynocentric, or they appeal to men's gynocentrism, right? Buy this or women will love you. Buy this and it'll make you more attractive to women, right? Buy this and it'll give you an excuse to go where the women are. Not buy this and it'll make you comfortable. Buy this and you'll be healthier. Like, you see a few of those as you start getting into the TV shows and movies and media that are intended to appeal to older men. Like, men are allowed to care about their health after they're 65, and their hands start hurting too much for them to be able to handle the lawnmower, the push lawnmower, right? But when they're 30 and they're watching, I don't know, whatever the equivalent is now of Friends. I frequently sit with someone who flips channels a lot, so I don't actually watch the shows, but I see a lot of ads. It's all stuff that appeals to, again, men's gynocentrism, not men's interest in themselves. Unless you're talking about little bits here and there of entertainment. This game is going to be on this channel at this time, and you probably want to watch it, or you can get tickets to this thing that you want to go to. But it's almost always about dating, life insurance to protect your family in case something happens to you, car insurance. Even appeals to, oh, look, this guy loves his mother, isn't that sweet? Buy our car insurance. Not really very androcentric there. But yeah, we hear this about positive portrayals of women's roles. Women are always the smart wife in commercials to the husband that makes stupid mistakes about housekeeping, doesn't know any better than to put the wrong thing in the washing machine.
Yeah, and here's Michael Flood saying adverts still show men as leaders and protectors and women in roles dependent on men. Like, in what world, Flood? Every advert shows men as incompetent, bumbling buffoons who can't do anything until the women in their life sort everything out using the products being advertised. Now, this used to be a tactic that went both ways. Back in the 60s, you could have an advert for a car so user-friendly that even a woman can use it. And then you'd have another one saying, an oven so friendly, even a man can use it. And they both play off sort of the stereotypes that each other have, because there are a lot of men and women in relationships together. And some things they understand and some things don't. So they try to appeal to one sex by saying something cheeky about the other sex. But half of that has disappeared now. You can't advertise a product by saying it's so simple, only a woman could use it. Even a woman could use it. Sorry. That would that would never make it off the sketching table, or whatever you put things at. But and what's left is nothing but adverts portraying men as useless idiots who are dependent on the sly and streetwise women's ways of knowing, or whatever. I guess it'll show them in a domestically protector role, such as father. It's like the Homer Simpson thing. It's like the Simpsons. It's like the dynamic of any couple in a sitcom in the last 50 years or ever. frankly. The man is only in a role as a leader and protector insofar as he goes to work in some shitty job that he doesn't like, and then he comes home and trips over himself until the woman in his life saves him from shit. Right? Sitcoms have attempted to progress further than this by just being mental in every way, but adverts are still. I can't tell if they're ahead of the game or behind the game, but they're further along the line of gynocentric nonsense.
Yeah.
Of the Homer Simpson sort of setup. You got a guy who's entirely dependent on a woman because he's simply too stupid to survive. That's to say that the woman is dependent on the man in that relationship is nonsense, because once again you're not looking at the emotional narrative, the ethical narrative behind all these things. You haven't even got statistics or percentages to throw at it, and now you're talking the complete opposite of reality, Michael. I am going to drink, and hopefully Michael Flood will not exist when I've put my drink down.
Good luck. That would be interesting. But no, he goes on with similar statements on male dominance and voiceovers, right? Male dominance is also visible in TV commercials, which is a weird way of wording things, in my opinion. And his evidence for this is that 32% of women's roles, but only 1% of men's, are as homemakers. Most homemakers, even today, are women. And the reason for that is a woman never gets treated like a deadbeat for not having a job, right? If she has a kid, then it's reasonable to society that she might not want to have a job, that she's doing the right thing by her kid by focusing on the child welfare and blah blah blah. If she does have a job, then she's lauded for taking responsibility for part of the family's finances. Women might criticize each other for those things. Women who have jobs will criticize female homemakers because, honestly, we know that you can do both, and you can, for the most part, as far as the chores are considered, like, obviously engaging with your child is not a chore. But doing things like dishes and laundry and vacuuming and all that stuff is 1,000 times easier with the appliances that men invented to make those jobs easier than it was even 20 years ago. Like, when I was a kid, there was no such thing as a vacuum cleaner that you just turned on and let it just constantly work in your house as needed, or that you could program to come on by itself and go all over your house and clean without you having to do anything, much less, one that your cat could ride around on in a cute little shark costume. Those didn't exist. I remember when we first got a microwave oven. I remember when we first got a dishwasher, because before that, I was the dishwasher. I remember when I was the television remote. So, all of that stuff, everything that's been created since then. I remember when the stereo in the living room was a piece of furniture large enough that you used it like a coffee table, and you had to take stuff off the top of it if you wanted to use the record player. And the speakers were bigger than the computer screens that I have on my desk. Like, all of these things, all of these changes that we have. I rarely have to dust in my house because I have a device that takes the dust out of the air because I'm allergic to dust. And those things, we didn't have that when I was 10, right? We didn't have a dishwasher when I was 10. We didn't have our washing machine was much more manual than it is now. You didn't have to crank it or anything, but you had to be really careful how you used it. We didn't have the ability to just throw all the laundry together in there besides the towels and have it not come out looking weird. We certainly didn't have a lot of stuff that Like when the phrase permanent press came about, and you didn't have to iron so many clothes. There are a lot of things that my mom had to do when I was a kid that I've never had to do in my adult life. I own almost nothing that needs ironed. I don't even know where our clothes iron is, actually. I know we have one somewhere in this apartment, but I have no idea where it is because I haven't used it in that long, right? But women bitch about being, overworked in housekeeping and so on. And yet, most of the people who don't have a job, which is a homemaker doesn't have a job outside the home. Everybody does housework, whether you are a homemaker or not, right? But most of the people who that's the only thing they do are women. So it's not unfair for television programming to portray it that way. Those portrayals are going to be downstream of culture, not the other way around. You cannot change the culture by portraying more men as jobless homemakers. You just make people not like those characters. And in terms of professionals, doctors, lawyers, etc., if you start looking into those professions, depending on what kind of doctor you're talking about, there's a lot more men that go for that profession than women. Unless you're looking at pediatricians, and you almost always see pediatricians portrayed as women because women dominate that field. So again, it's not about equalizing portrayal. It's more about portraying things the way they are in real life. It's kind of silly for him to complain about that. And the voiceover thing bugs me too, because when women voice over things, when they want to appeal to your emotions, when the advertiser wants to appeal to your feelings. It's why all the well, at least most of the ads for things like organizations that rescue animals, and organizations that are send food to people in emergency situations, or in poverty situations and stuff like that. A lot of those times you'll hear a voiceover that's a woman, because they know that the woman's going to tug at your heartstrings just a little bit more than a man will. If the man can at all. But going on, in video games, he says, a major study of video game dialogue finds that there is half as much dialogue from female characters as from male characters. When did the point of video games become the dialogue?
There are some games that try to get plot across, especially now that they can do so many things with games. It's not just Pac-Man wandering across screens. You can actually have sort of characters nowadays, but they're still characters that you need to step into as the player,
right?
And once again, if you can step into a female role and simply play it, then you get complaints from women saying that you're manipulating women's bodies. Oh God, this is bringing me back. I do this video game section would bring me back to Gamergate, because this is exactly what happened in Gamergate. They were like, there aren't enough women in video games, and when there are women, you're objectifying them by controlling them. And then we go, but most controllable players are men, precisely because you don't get these complaints when you control a man's body. It's perfectly fine. And then they go, well, there are too many men in game. So no, all roads lead to women are being oppressed, and so we should control the video games industry until we declare that women are no longer oppressed, which will be never.
Yeah. It bugs me. Like, dialogue is important, right? And Boda has pointed that out. For story games, dialogue is important. It's an important contributing factor. But that's the only thing he mentions is dialogue. He doesn't mention anything else about games. I have to wonder if it's because there's not really any women's issues in regard to games. Because again, like when you get to the story games, now he's probably ignoring games that are not action games, because there's a lot of games for little girls where all the characters or the main characters are female, and they have a lot of dialogue. Almost everything in the game is preceded and then followed up by dialogue. And I see people playing those games a lot because in my work there's a tendency for people to be more interested in things that they were, or to be still interested in things they were interested in as kids, like children's television shows like Dora the Explorer or the Muppets or things like that. So yeah, those games actually do show more femininity and more feminine dialogue. But when you get into action games and the action hero is male, almost all of the dialogue is going to include the main character. And so at least half the dialogue is going to be the main character either talking first or responding to somebody that talked. And you control that side of it sometimes. But that is going to skew the numbers. Which, in my opinion, makes it not so much sexist as silly to discuss that at all. And it still, again, does not contribute to one way or another how men, whether the media hates men or not, which isn't really our argument anyway. That it's gynocentric like everything else. Then he goes on to say, there are further gender disparities and stereotypes in newspaper, comics, and clip art. And then he doesn't say what they are. He has references to two of his links. Then men even dominate media coverage of women's issues. For example, one study found that on abortion, men were 81% of those quoted. On birth control, 75% of those quoted. And even on women's rights, they were 52% of those quoted. I'm assuming by news organizations. And organizations, women were only 31%, and organizations were only 17%. And I don't care. Like, media coverage of women's issues, they're looking for people who are going to say pro-feminist things. Or they're looking for people who are going to say things that are going to work as clickbait, right? So they will either show off how this guy or that guy supports women, and you should too, by example or whatever, or they're going to go find somebody like Andrew Tate to, find the most outrageous thing that he said lately and use it for clickbait. So, of course, there's going to be a lot of men. In terms of official statements, this is how we want things to be. This is how, this is what these organizations are doing now. This is the issues under discussion and so on. That's when they go talk to women. They just don't do that as often because they're usually, trying to clickbait you. But, so then he says, and this is interesting too because he treats the statement in a particular way here. Thus, women are hardly in the position of threatening the traditional domains of men.
They are the traditional domains of men.
Mm-hmm. Like, everything that men do, they either do to get women's attention, right? To provide for the women in their lives, to contribute to a society that is ultimately gynocentric, or to find a way to be comfortable living with those conditions. Right, so it's always about women. But yeah, women are hardly in the position of threatening the traditional domains of men. It's interesting that, they will tell you their goals by telling you what you're afraid of. Oh, you're afraid we're going to replace you. Oh, so you're trying to replace us. That's basically the way that you should respond to that, because you haven't made that argument. Feminists have accused you of that argument. In every aspect of the mass media, he says, they are underrepresented compared to their actual numbers in the population. More than half the population is women, it's true, right? But if is more than half of the medical population women, is more than half of the upper echelon of the medical population women, right? Are more than half of real life action heroes women? Because I don't think that's the case. So why should more than half of action heroes in movies be women? Would it be normal for women, for men and women to expect to see that in a movie?
I mean, if you're going to do a movie or a video game about war, from pretty much any time in history, are you going to complain that there aren't any women in it? Yes, you are. Even though the only people drafted into war ever have been men. So obviously a war game is going to involve men. And a conflict game is going to involve men, because men are, I don't know, whatever the equivalent of drafting is. Men are expected to play the role of fighter in not just wars, but any given small conflict. And games like Call of Duty and stuff, obviously is going to be mostly men, and you're going to complain that there aren't enough women in it. But are you going to do a game based on World War II with a bunch of women in the army? You could give it a go, but it's not the complaints from incels in their basement covered in Cheeto dust saying, "Oh, but there weren't women fighting in the trenches in the World War." No, the problem is you'll get complaints from feminists saying there are women being blown to bits in this game. This is so misogynistic.
Well,
you
or
can't do this.
they would complain because the game portrays women doing what women actually did in those wars, which was mostly in the medical field. Like, a lot of nurses were women, right? So if you portrayed things from the female angle in regard to World War I and World War II, they'd be, "Oh, you're stereotyping women." No, we're portraying history accurately. Get used to it. It doesn't change. But yeah, it does kind of bug me that we're still in the position of arguing whether or not these portrayals are anti-male. Like, and it's kind of stupid, because again, that's not really our argument, right? When you look at how media portrays men can be disposable. Women can't, for the most part. And that that men can be the person you don't get upset about losing in movie. Women really can't be the person that you don't have to care about losing. Women can't be the person whose death is meaningless to everybody. Women can't be the person whose death is stupid. Women can't be the person whose death is celebrated. Men can be all those things. Right? That's a very different issue than how many men are portrayed versus how many women. It's a very different issue than traditional domains too. And as he looks at how many men are portrayed in professional fields and how active they are and how much power and influence they have, you have to remember power and influence includes inspiration, and how many men are portrayed as doing everything they do in the movie to save a woman, to provide for a woman, to impress a woman, to get the girl. children's media, he says. We'll do this one, and then we'll stop at in toy commercials on TV. So, this ought to be interesting because I raised 3 kids, and of course grew up with a bunch of boys watching boys cartoons, and not getting as excited about the stuff that I was the target audience for. Children's media. Anti-feminist commentators also claim that the media is mean to boys. So have you guys ever claimed that? Because I don't recall ever saying that. Anybody?
That's not how I would word it. I would word it in much the way I recently have. That women are always portrayed as ethically and morally superior to men.
Yeah.
Same with girls to boys. And I've just read ahead in the article, and again, the evidence debunks this. And what is this evidence? There are more males than females.
This is exactly the same thing you did before.
I'm going for a cigarette. I will be back in 5 minutes.
So, I'm going to ask, why the hell do feminists do this, right? When we talk about media for boys versus media for girls, for instance, there are shows that were for boys that I liked when my son was growing up, right? And there were shows that he liked too. There were a couple of shows that just portrayed little boys having the experience of being little boys in their family and their community, their school, experiencing, the kind of conflicts that little boys have with each other, and the kind of conflicts that little boys have with little girls, and the conflicts they have with themselves over little girls or over other little boys. And they didn't treat being a boy as making the kid the bad guy, right? They treated being a boy as an experience of learning and developing and growing and enjoying the world around them and things like that, right? Those were the educational types of TV shows. Like you had Arnold, you had Little Bill, you had, I can't remember the name of there's Little Bear, and there was one with, I can't remember the name of the show. There's a lot of memes from this show, and the characters seem to be like humanoid animals. And there's a sister character and a brother character, and it's why can't I remember? Arthur. But yeah, Hey Arnold was one. Arthur was one of those shows, and you could see portrayals of just kids being kids, right? Rugrats had both sexes, kids being kids, and Rugrats was made to entertain grown-ups with how cute and funny little kids are. And then you had the superhero shows, right? What I grew up watching, like the Spider-Man, Transformers, G.I. Joe, not superheroes there, but still, Voltron, Thundercats, like all of that stuff, Masters of the Universe, those were the things that I really got into. There was, I heard that Arthur went pretty woke later on. I don't think we saw that when my son was little, but I suppose that doesn't surprise me. But yeah, I didn't watch a lot of the, there was a My Little Pony show when I was a kid that I don't think I ever watched. I remember other girls' cartoons. There was Gem. I saw a couple episodes of that because sometimes there would be girls over at the house. There were a few other things. Mostly, though, what we watched was stuff like the superhero shows, or we'd watch Scooby-Doo. That was probably the most popular with both sexes growing up. And this idea of a balance or imbalance of male and female characters, that didn't have anything to do with why we wanted to watch those shows. We watched the Wacky Races. Those were playing. They were cartoons that were made in the 70s and the 60s. Oh yeah, I hated the Care Bears. I don't know why. I just didn't like them. I wouldn't watch Care Bear anything. To this day I don't know. Maybe it would because it pandered in some way or another. And I was allergic to the strawberry shortcake toys. So, well, and Gummy Bears was made to sell candy for crying out loud. And actually, my son watched Kim Possible. He watched Totally Spies was another one that he watched. So he watched shows that were targeted toward girls too, and I watched shows that were targeted toward boys. And I watched the Dungeons and Dragons show cartoon. I liked that when that played, right? I don't know how many people remember that one, but watched a lot of that kind of thing. But and there were a lot of different fun cartoons when I was little and when the kids were little. There's a lot of stuff that came along after my time that were fun, and in between that. My kids didn't grow up watching because they weren't little when those cartoons came out, but I didn't grow up watching because I wasn't little anymore when those came out. That are none of them are I don't know, polarized in a way that he's like the number of characters doesn't really matter. The types of characters doesn't really matter. Half the cartoons we watched, the characters they didn't look human, right? They're weird humanoid things, or they're aliens, robots, stuff like that.
And it's only the voice that gives you any indication of whether they're male or female. And even then, a lot of boys are played by female voice actors because they tend to be good at the high-pitched voices.
A lot of cartoons when I was a kid were anthropomorphic animals. And a lot of cartoons when I was a kid were made to appeal to adults. Like cartoons that they played Saturday morning cartoons, because we didn't have cartoons all day either. That's one. By the time my kids were little, were old enough to sit and watch TV, you had Cartoon Network. When I was a kid, cartoons were from like 5 or 6 in the morning on Saturday morning, however early you got up, until maybe about noon, and then you went outside, right? And after school, there would be a few cartoons. There would be an after-school special movie that was usually preachy. There was a TV show where they would read from a book, and you would see an artist drawing pictures themed based on the thing that they were reading. And there were books that I got because of that show. I think it was called Picture Pages or something like that. But in any case, I know that was a show anyway. But yeah, none of that was geared toward boys or girls. It was geared toward getting kids to change their behavior, getting kids to read, getting kids to buy certain toys, getting kids to buy certain candy, like the gummy bears. And it was all marketing. And even today, you look at kids' cartoons, there will be kids' toys marketed around those. Kids' clothing, shoes, T-shirts, hoodies, jewelry, video games marketed around it. Most kids' programming is made to market other things to kids and other things to parents. A lot of kids' TV show characters and in particular cartoon characters are featured in kids' educational video games and stuff that you can get. So it is all of this stuff that he's saying about this many boys or this many girls, male characters versus female characters, gender content. What is he calling gender content?
Anything can be gender. Gender can be anything. That's what's so insidious about the word. It's it's not. It was never even supposed to be a word that indicates biological sex. The word gender is related to the word genre. It just means type. It just means category. So people are looking deeply into what gender means, and there's no need, because it doesn't have any deeper meaning. It has possibly the shallowest meaning of any word in the English language.
Yeah.
Because it can mean anything. By design, it means anything, and in practice, it means even more anything. It's what we say it is,
Yeah.
and what we say goes. Yeah.
And I find these arguments that he's making here kind of pathetic, because he's really, like, he'll say a phrase, he'll talk about gender stereotypes, but then at the same time, when you look at cartoons, they're over the top. They're intended to be over the top. When you look at cartoons, they're intended to appeal to kids' sense of the world around them, and then to sort of break it and make them laugh, or make them just draw out emotions that'll get them to want to continue to watch the show, make them interested. And I don't know, it bugs feminists that you portray male characters as having interests that are typically male interests, and female characters as having interests that are typically female interests, but they reflect the reality that the kids live in. And if you made the cartoons completely detached from reality, not just in terms of like, well, cartoon physics don't match with real physics, but totally and completely devoid of any touch to reality at all, kids wouldn't watch them. They would be disturbed by them, right? It would be like giving them something psychedelic to watch. They might be upset. They might find it fascinating one or two times, but the rest of the time they wouldn't necessarily find it entertaining at all, especially if there's no storyline. And you really can't have a storyline that has no touch with reality, because it ceases to be interesting to people. They don't have a way of connecting with it if there's no touch to reality at all there. And in terms of the gender content, like I object to that terminology just on its face. Where they're saying attractiveness is emphasized more for female characters. Again, that's pulled right out of real life. And it's emphasized more for female characters than male characters, because it's something that female viewers are more likely to identify with. Where it says intelligence for male characters, I think he's probably talking about problem solving, which women often relegate to men. And then female characters being more likely than male to be shown in secondary roles such as helpers, I kind of find that to be bullshit as well, because there are cartoons that have no male characters. So that's how do you put the female characters in a secondary role there? So I think he's probably going to do this. The only thing he said about children's books is the same thing. Twice as many male as female main characters. Female main characters are more likely to be portrayed inside the home without paid occupation. Blah, blah, blah. Most kids' books, when I was reading to my kids when they were growing up, most little kids' books, again, are about little kids, little kid characters. The adult characters are secondary, unless you talk about Amelia Bedelia. She's an adult character that's a primary character, but she has paid compensation, or paid occupation. She's working as a housekeeper, but it's still paid. So, I don't know. This is his only argument. His only argument is that men are portrayed more, and men do more work in these portrayals. which doesn't address the issues at all. But I'm going to stop it here because there's only so much Michael Flood that I can take in one night, and it's getting close to 8:30.
I've lost at least 50% of my will to live. This is a good place to stop.
Yeah, he has one play in his playbook. I hope his articles aren't all going to be like this, because this is going to be a slog through mud the whole time that we're reading his stuff. He doesn't have anything original to say, and his arguments aren't addressing anything that we've said, and then they also don't actually debunk the straw man that he constructs every single time. It's like he's half-assing it. So, well, let's see. We don't have a lot of super chats on this. There's not really a whole lot to say in super chats, but we do have a super chow. Meredith G gave us $5 and said HBR Talk 258. I think I have it as 255. I maybe screwed up the count again. But everybody knows women can't do math, right? No, just kidding. I lose track sometimes because of how many weeks I've missed here and there.
Not 285? That's what it says here.
Yeah, oh, I see what she did. Okay. Dyslexic fingers. 258. 285. Yeah, you're right. I have 285 and it says 250. It does say 258, right? In the...
Can't see it, but
yeah.
What's Meredith saying?
Well, sometimes when you have a dyslexic, like one of the things is the difference between dyslexia and just getting your numbers mixed up is that once you see it wrong, you see it wrong until you like separate everything apart. You can't fix it in your head. You know how, like, if you see an optical illusion that has two different ways you can see it, and you can switch back and forth in your head between the two of them, the old lady and the young lady illusion, for instance. Yeah, the show title does say 285. Okay. Yeah, because
sometimes people just type too quickly, especially when they're doing numbers, because they know exactly where they are, so they go da-da-da, and two of them are the wrong way around.
It's
not even dyslexia.
Yeah, and the switching numbers when you're typing isn't dyslexia. And having stuff switch sometimes for a moment when you're reading it isn't. It's when you've seen it wrong and you can't undo the illusion. And it's funny because, like, I can do that with optical illusions, but sometimes when I fuck up a word, I can't. I go back and I really have to work hard to get my brain to admit that that's not what I'm seeing. And then and when I look at it, I see the wrong thing until and it takes a lot of effort to get it to change, like the vision of it to change. Oh, I see. It's this. So, but anyway. So Meredith gave us honey for the badgers, and thank you, Meredith. And that is the only super chow we have, and no super chats. And I'm going to look at Rumble really quick, and I don't see the comments. Make that big, and there we go. Okay, there we go. NobaFan21 gave us $1 and said, Are there real women who actually see other women as heroes and idolize them the same way guys do with male heroes? I usually only see it in fiction. In real life, they often tear each other apart. So, one of my greatest heroes of all time, that is a female hero, changed her whole life to help other people. And I can't talk about her a lot, basically because what she did created an institution for individuals who are particularly vulnerable that I don't want feminists harassing. I've mentioned her a few times, mentioned her before, and so on. It doesn't have anything to do specifically with men's rights, although victims of this type of vulnerability are more likely to be male than female. But it's a vulnerability that isn't something that society necessarily inflicts. It's a vulnerability that sometimes just happens to people, and we don't know how to prevent it in all cases, and so there are people that need assistance. So there is that. Another one is my mom. And I saw her go through things that ordinary people don't usually go through, in particular women. And when they do, they're usually completely disabled. But she ran a business. She was a full-time homemaker. She did substitute teaching. She was a member of the city council of the community that I grew up in. She was an ambassador to our sister city. She was involved in the Miami Area Canal Society. At the county level, she was involved in her political party very heavily. You could not stop her with a wrecking ball. And she practically got hit by one. She got hit by a big old Buick back in 1982 when they were made of steel. So, I don't know. Some women do, some women I don't think do.
I think that's the default answer.
Yeah.
But before the days of everyone having their favorite superhero or their favorite role model who wasn't Jesus, the go-to answer was, my mum's my hero, my dad's my hero.
Yeah.
It's always wholesome when someone says that, and occasionally someone does say, "Yeah, my dad is my hero," but it's less common nowadays because so many fewer people have fathers in the first place.
Yeah.
Well, dads who are present in their lives in the first place for whatever reason, and so yeah, they're still likely to say, "Well, my favorite female role model is my mother because she was always there for me because she was always allowed to be there for me." But in an increasing number of cases, they don't have the option of saying my dad is my hero because he was never allowed to see them, and so yeah, obviously they resort to movies and video games and maybe even cartoons. Anywhere else where they can find a father figure, therein we have the crux of what's wrong with society. But you all know this already. We're just here to remind you of that unfortunate fact here at Honey Badger Radio. There are not enough fathers in the world. There are not enough organic role models.
Yeah.
And the media entertainment industrial complex is filling that role, often in quite nefarious ways, and perhaps often in more wholesome ways. But yeah, the nefarious faction is has a little bit more power than we would like it to at this point, and this is why Hollywood is leading the way in what you might call gender relations, and it's all going horribly wrong, as I'm sure you know. Stay tuned for the next exciting episode of HBR Talk, where we explore this hideous phenomenon in its various iterations. All right.
One of the sad things about the way feminists talk about role models is they talk about it like, if you're male, your role models can only be male, and if you're female, your role models can only be female. Like, one of my best role models growing up, obviously, was my dad. And I've imitated him in ways that probably are unexpected for most people. My dad was a bit of a workaholic. That's me being underwhelming there. My dad had 4 jobs for a lot of the time when I was growing up. He got his fingers into all kinds of stuff. He was anytime something new and interesting came up in creativity, he was interested in it. And he made every day take your daughter to work day. Like, we didn't do take your daughter to work day. I learned my dad's profession. I learned teaching, and I learned photography. I learned journalism. from my dad because of that, right? I learned portraiture because my mom ran the portrait business, but I learned those other things because of my dad, right? And my grandfather, I watched him go through some struggles that you would expect if you really knew my grandfather as a person. You would have expected him to be disabled and institutionalized, but he didn't do that. He provided for a family, and he was part of a very industry-changing initiative in medicine with my grandmother, and he did great things, just unbelievably great things. And the whole time he was struggling with mental health conditions that we didn't know he had until he was in his 80s or 90s. And if he had received the standard treatment of the day for those conditions in his middle age or in his youth, he would have been a zombie for his whole life. But he just didn't let that happen to him. He had things to do, people to take care of, people to provide for, kids to raise. Like, you know, that's a hell of a accomplishment in my book. And so I don't know. It bugs me that people would think that because I'm female, I couldn't look up to that. Because, you know, that was my male family member, right? That I couldn't look up to my uncle, who was 6'6", you know, very big guy, like size 6X t-shirt, you know, big, and was probably the most gentle person I met up until the point when I met my husband, who is also one of my heroes. Like, there are times when things have been done to him that you would think he'd want to tear somebody's arms off and beat him to death, you know, with it. And he could. And he would never do anything even remotely violent out of anger. You know, like his control over his responses to mistreatment are amazing to me. Like, he doesn't even get outraged. And there are things that I've watched him go through and been there for him the whole time. And I've wanted to do, you know, crap that you'd regret later because it's just shamefully angry and mean stuff on his behalf. And he have been talked down from it, you know, by my husband, who's like, it's not worth it. So a lot of people I look up to are male. The people that I look up to that are closest to me, my brother's toughness and his way of handling conflict when I was growing up, very different from mine, and, you know, very admirable in comparison to mine. And his compassion for bullies blew my mind when we were growing up. You know, so this thing about role models having to be the same sex as you. Don't let people do that to you. Look up to people with good character and recognize what you're looking up to, and you know, what you're looking down on. And don't worry about what sex they are, because it doesn't matter. Right? If somebody does something admirable, it's admirable. And if somebody is an asshole, don't emulate them. That's pretty simple in my book. I don't know. Anyway, that's it for our super chats, our super chows, our rumble rants. And you know, I haven't even mentioned the other honey badgers. I'm just gonna go off and like you know, the Oscar speech and thank everybody in my life. But the fact is, yeah, my role models come in both sexes. And I'll bet most of you out there listening, your role models probably come in both sexes too. You know, most of you probably can think of adults that you grew up with, and you have negative role models and positive role models. You have people that you're like, oh, I don't want my life to end up the way this person's life ended up, and I identify these things in their life as reasons why their life was so hard, so I'm not going to do those things. Like, you can think of people like that, and that's both sexes too, right? So, I don't know. I guess that's all I'm going to say on it. But
You're one of my role models, Hannah.
Oh, you're a sweetheart. You're one of mine too. So, all the honey badgers are, honestly. Like people who are just filled with love and compassion. And it's just what I want to see in the world. That's why we do this, right? But yeah. And with that,
I just like y'all because y'all are sassy.
Oh, that I am. So I call myself a professional smartass on Twitter. It's not because I'm a comedian. I'm not a comedian. I'm just good at smarting off to people.
Sass is your middle name or your last name because you're Gloria Sass.
Gloria Sass. That's right. That's right. So, thanks for going through this, slogging through this rancid mud with me. And thanks to everybody who listened to us slogging through the rancid mud. Sorry Mr. Flood repeats himself so much. Like, he only has one play in his playbook. Maybe we'll see other plays when we address other issues. Thanks to everybody who works in the background to make HBR Talk happen.
33% more.
Yes, we'll see 33% more. And he'll probably cite Anderson as the source for that. Good night, all.
Good night.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.